I'm here today to wrap up my read through of the entire Lord Peter Wimsey mystery series. I'm going to rank all the books in the order that I enjoyed them, and I'm going to share my overall thoughts on how I enjoyed the series as a whole. Hello book friends, I'm Jen and welcome to my reading life and happy Vlogmas. I'm here today to wrap up my entire read through of all the Lord Peter Wimsey mystery novels written by Dorothy L. Sayers. I decided this year to make it my goal to read through all of the books in the Lord Peter Wimsey series. From the first book to the last book, I read one a month. There are 11 novels in the Lord Peter Wimsey mystery series, and I read them from January through November, and so I am here today to wrap it all up and tell you what I thought of them. So what I have done is I have ranked all of the books in terms of the ones I liked the least all the way up to my very favorite in the series, and I'm going to share those with you. But let us get started, and I'm going to go through this ranking. I'm also going to let you know where that particular book falls in series order. So let's start with the one I liked the least, and that is The 5 Red Herrings. This is book 6 in the series, and I really struggled with this one. There is a very strong Scottish dialect because this book takes place in Scotland that I just had such a hard time reading. I don't know if it was just the mood I was in when I read this particular book. The other element that I didn't love about this one was I felt like it was very obvious who done it. And then we take this very circuitous route to get back to the final reveal of that. I actually sort of gave up on really reading this one. I found a BBC dramatization of it, which really helped me. There doesn't seem to be like an audiobook version of this, at least not that I could find anywhere. I did find this BBC radio dramatization, so I listened to that, and then I kind of skimmed through the remainder of the novel after I started listening to that because it was a struggle. It was a struggle. So definitely my least favorite in the series. Then number 10 in my ranking of the series is actually the first book in the series, and that is Whose Body? And Whose Body obviously introduces us to Lord Peter Wimsey. We meet Bunter in this one as well. And while this is good, it just feels like it takes a while to get acclimated in Lord Peter Wimsey's world and get acclimated to the way Dorothy L. Sayers writes, his pattern of speech, and just her whole writing style. This is the second time that I have read this one, and I read it, actually it might be the third time I've read it. I read it maybe 8 years ago also, and I remembered feeling that same way. It's one of the shorter books in the series, and yet it was a little slow going. I do like the mystery in this one. The mystery is good, but like I said, it's just it takes a bit of getting used to. And then book number 9 in my rankings, which is the second book in the series, is Clouds of Witness. And the things that I liked about this were we got to see and meet Lord Peter Wimsey's family. So the mystery in this one surrounds his brother. And so we really do get to get involved in the Wimsey family dynamic, which is kind of interesting. And we get to meet his mother and his sister-in-law. And we go through this trial where his brother is accused of murder. So that was an interesting aspect of this. But again, I just feel like the earlier books in the series didn't grab me as much as some of the later books did. And then number 8 in my ranking is actually book 7 in the series, and that is Have His Carcass. And this is actually one of the books featuring Harriet Vane. And I will say that I really was enjoying this when I started it. And for about the first third, I kept thinking, wow, this is going to be one of my favorites in the series. And then it just kind of dragged for a good portion of the book until we kind of get to the denouement at the end, and then things sped up again. But yeah, it was a bit of a struggle for the middle section of this book. It is fairly chunky. I mean, this is a hardcover version, but I mean, the font in this is not very big, and yeah, this was a bit chunky for a mystery novel, I felt like. And again, this was another one where we took kind of a circuitous route to get to the end. And that route was just slow and not as enjoyable as some of the others. And then the 7th book in my rankings is book 3 in the series, and that is Unnatural Death. I have to say, when I was pulling out all of the books and looking at my reviews and putting together my final ranking, I could not, for the life of me, remember this story. So that's why it's fairly low in my rankings. And to be honest, I know there's an older woman who dies in this. Yeah, a wealthy old woman. The one good thing about this book is that we meet Miss Clemson. And Miss Clemson, she is she's a spinster character, and she assists Lord Peter Wimsey on a number of occasions. And so we get introduced to her in this one, and that is really fun. But other than that, I just found this a little bit on the forgettable side. So there we have it. And then number 6 in my ranking is the 4th book in the series, and that is The Unpleasantness at the Bologna Club. And in this one, a gentleman is found murdered at Lord Peter Wimsey's club, and of course he comes in to help solve the mystery. And this was good. I enjoyed it. I thought the mystery was one of the stronger ones in the earlier books in the series. And yeah, I liked this. And I probably would say of the earlier books in the series, before Harriet Vane arrives, this one's probably my favorite. Okay, we've made it into the top 5 of my rankings. And coming in at number 5 is book 8 in the series, which is Murder Must Advertise. And this one is really, really fun. We see Lord Peter Wimsey going undercover at an advertising agency where a man has died and everyone thinks it's an accident, but perhaps there was foul play. And so we follow along as Lord Peter Wimsey goes undercover. And it's funny because when the book starts out, you're introduced to this character, Mr. Breeden, and it took me a little bit to realize that that was Lord Peter Wimsey undercover. So all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait a second. And then I think I went back and read the first few pages again just to like read it with a different context. But I definitely liked this one, though I do have to say there is something about the ending of this that I felt like I missed something, and that may have just been my read of it. So if you want to hear me talk more about that, I will link my wrap-up video where I read this particular book. I actually think I might reread this one again in the not too distant future to see if I can figure out where the missing piece is that didn't get wrapped up for me. It was very strange. And then coming in at number 4 is book 5 in the series, where we finally get introduced to Harriet Vane, and that is Strong Poison. And in this one, Harriet Vane is on trial for murder. She's on trial for murdering her boyfriend, lover, I can't remember exactly which, and Lord Peter Wimsey is convinced that she is innocent. And Harriet Vane doesn't really want his help, but he does it anyway. And so this was just a wonderful introduction to her and to the relationship between Harriet and Peter. And I really, really enjoyed this one. This is a very strong entry in the series. Okay, we're down to my top 3 books in the series, and coming in at number 3 is book 9 in the series, and that is The Nine Tailors. And this book was so good. I really love this one. We find Peter and Bunter, their car breaks down, they sort of have a bit of an accident, and they get stuck in this small village. And then there is a death in the village later on. And so Lord Peter Wimsey and Bunter come back. There is a lot about bell ringing, like the actual ringing of bells in churches. And I found that really fascinating. I actually read a historical fiction novel a couple of years ago that featured bell ringing. And I just find that kind of fascinating, that whole world of bell ringing. And I really, really like this one. I loved the small English village. We get to meet all the different characters, and there is a bit of a natural disaster that happens, and just seeing the villagers come together and have Lord Peter Wimsey as a part of that. This was just such an enjoyable read. Really, really loved this one. And then number 2 is actually the final book in the series, and that is Busman's Honeymoon. And in this one, we follow Harriet and Peter after they get married. They are on their honeymoon, and they have bought a house in the village where Harriet lived as a little child, and they, of course, stumble upon a dead body. The man who sold the house to them is found in the cellar, and of course, they must discover what goes on. And I just really love, this was the one book where you really get to see Harriet and Peter together for a long period of time. You get to see lots and lots of interactions between them. And I just love that. I love Harriet Vane. She is a fantastic female character. And yes, their relationship, it's just utterly, utterly charming. And yes, I can't recommend this one enough. It is so, so good. And then my final pick, if you know the Lord Peter Wimsey series, you know which book came in at number 1 by now, and that is Gaudy Night. And in Gaudy Night, we mostly follow Harriet Vane in this one, and she has gone back to her Oxford college for Gaudy Night, which is sort of a bit of a reunion night. And this one actually doesn't feature a murder in it, but there is like poison pen letters going around the college that Harriet had gone to. And the sort of dean of the college asks Harriet to stay and see if she can help kind of figure out what's going on, because it's just really been detrimental to the morale of the girls and the staff, and all kinds of pranks are being played. And I loved the Oxford University setting. I loved how we got to know Harriet so well in this book. I loved all the female characters in here, and Lord Peter Wimsey really takes a back seat in this one. He doesn't really come into the story until well into it. He's actually out of the country for a good chunk of the novel, and it was just fun to see Harriet trying to solve this mystery. And this is just, I mean, I really, really think this is such an excellent example of a mystery novel that is incredibly well put together. I know some people find this very literary, and it is literary because of its Oxford setting, but I just think it is a page turner, and I think it is the best of a very good series. And that is my ranking of all of the Lord Peter Wimsey books. And I just thought I would do a quick wrap up of my overall thoughts on the series as a whole. Overall, I really enjoyed this series. I think it is a fantastic mystery series. And I definitely think if you're a fan of Golden Age mysteries, that you absolutely should read Dorothy L. Sayers. She is one of the top players in the game. Her name is well known for a reason. And these books are well worth your time. The things that I love the most about this series, I really enjoyed the overall arc of the character development of Lord Peter Wimsey, of Harriet Vane, even of Bunter. So I just really like how we get to see that evolve over such a long period of time, over so many books. I loved Harriet, obviously. I think that's pretty clear. I also really loved Miss Clemson. I wish she had been in more of the books, and I'm curious if she's in some of the short stories, because I would very much love to read some short stories featuring her, because she is a delightful character. I also really like Bunter. I think Bunter just adds a really lovely element to the books. There's a theme that runs throughout, because Lord Peter Wimsey was in World War I, and so he's got some shell shock, and he still kind of suffers the aftermath of that. And Bunter is such, even though he is ultimately a servant, he's just such a good friend to Lord Peter Wimsey, and so good at taking care of him. We really see that in the early books, and then we see it again in Busman's Honeymoon. And yes, I enjoy Bunter very much. For the things that I didn't love about the series, my biggest complaint is that I felt like the earlier books weren't as strong as the books later in the series. Obviously, the more writers write, the better they get at it, and the more, I think, invested in their series and their characters they become. So that's not wholly surprising. I also felt like there were a few of the books that were overly long, that it felt tedious to get to where we needed to go. Have His Carcass is probably the best example of that. And then the one thing I really think is we need Lord Peter Wimsey to have a counterpoint. That is why I think people love the Harriet Vane books the best. If you look at reviews of Dorothy L. Sayers' books, or you talk to people who've read this series, so many of them will say, well, oh, once Harriet Vane enters, the series just really picks up. And I 100% agree with that. And I think that's because we need sort of that counterpoint to Lord Peter Wimsey's kind of foppish behavior. And, you know, his sort of upper crust kind of mannerisms and things. And yes, so she brings that to the stories. Bunter does that a little bit as well. Miss Clemson does that also. So it's good to have that balance. I think if the books were just Lord Peter Wimsey, I think I might have gotten more tired of them as time went on. Now, how do I feel about having read the books in order from start to finish? And I'm glad that I did it. I really am. Do I think you need to read them that way? I don't. The only exception to that is I do think you need to read the final few books kind of in order. So my recommendation is, if you don't want to start with the first books in the series, start with book 5, which is Strong Poison. And that's where we get introduced to Harriet Vane. I don't think you will feel you missed anything if you start there. I think you can get into the story very easily, and then you could read books 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Or if you don't want to read all of those, I would read my top 4 picks, which are Strong Poison, The Nine Tailors, Gaudy Night, and Busman's Honeymoon. Those 4, in my opinion, are the best in the series. And that is my final thoughts on Lord Peter Wimsey. I will definitely read the short stories at some point. I don't know when. I've seen some bind-ups of like the complete Lord Peter Wimsey short stories. So I'm tempted to put that on my wish list and pick that up at some point. But I definitely am glad that I read through all the novels. I will definitely reread my top few picks because I definitely think they're worth it, especially Gaudy Night. I definitely think it's worth a reread. I have read it before, but it was when I was quite young, and I think it will be worth reading again. I'd love to hear from all of you. Have you read the Lord Peter Wimsey mysteries? All of them? Any of them? Do you have a favorite? If you haven't read them, do you think you might pick them up at some point? And would you read the entire series, or do you think you would just pick and choose? I'd love to talk all things Lord Peter Wimsey and Dorothy L. Sayers down in the comments. Thank you as always for watching this video. I really appreciate all of your support, especially during Vlogmas. This has been so much fun so far, and I have lots more content coming your way. If you enjoyed this video, if you could hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet and you want to see more bookish content from me, please hit that subscribe button. And I'll be back with another Vlogmas video very soon. Bye!